I would like to, as you received in your Friday packet, the proposed stormwater project implementation plan. Certainly one of the more engaging conversations that we've had is the proposed increase in the stormwater project. And then I'm sure we'll have some extensive conversation as we also have an alternative proposal from two of the council members. So with that, I'm going to let, it's your
Let's
discretion.
proceed with Phil's presentation.
Okay, very good. We're here today to talk about the implementation plan for whatever additional monies we are able to receive in this year's budget. And as a starting point, I will say that my briefing is basically put together based on the city manager's proposed recommendation. So with that, we had several projects on this list that were included in a $300 million package of improvement projects. There's actually about 200 million, just under 200 million of flood control projects. The remaining 100 million is basically for operations and maintenance and regulatory compliance initiatives. If you look at the list, you'll see that when we put together these estimates, we put them together many months ago as we were preparing the CIP. And we have a couple of them, Sherwood Lakes and Asheville Park, that we have completed some modeling and preliminary analysis of. And we have determined that we believe the total estimated costs, at least for construction, will be a little bit less than what we had originally estimated. My recommendation to you right up front is I would not change these estimates from what we submitted, because we know that all of these estimates are very rough estimates. Some of the projects are probably going to be a little bit more expensive. Some are going to be a little bit less expensive than the numbers you see here. We think overall the 300 million is probably a fairly accurate number. Let me just also say that we are in very early stages of doing a lot of the analysis work on these different neighborhoods. Windsor Woods, Princess Anne Plaza, and the Lakes are all pretty much interrelated, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. And all three of those are fully funded within the 15-year recommended program. They are the only projects on this list that are fully funded within that 15-year period. Before we get to construction work, we are doing a substantial amount of real heavy lifting maintenance work. In Windsor Woods, we have 4 different canals that we are undertaking dredging work to get those canals back to their original designs. And quite frankly, this was all work that we had planned, funded, and we're working on the designs before Hurricane Matthew hit us. So we were planning to do these anyway. We are now at the point where we have one of those canals is under construction, 2 additional will be under construction in May, and another one in this fall. In Sherwood Lakes, we have been doing some temporary pumping to get that lake down to an elevation of somewhere between 3 and 4 feet of elevation. There are 2 lakes in Sherwood. If you recall, both of those lakes were former borrow pits before subdivisions were built around them. And during the time they were being used as borrow pits, there was a constant dewatering operation. And that kept all the water out as they were digging. When you do that, one of the things that occurs is all of the groundwater around those pits also goes down with the dewatering. So when you let the pits fill up again, then the water will rise to some level. During the design of Sherwood Lakes, the designers for the development just used as a thinking that the elevation would rise to about 3 feet. Well, it didn't. It rose to about 6 feet elevation. And that's why we had the flooding that we all saw back during the recent storms. So as a temporary measure, we have pumps out there, and we are keeping the elevations reduced to between 3 and 4 feet. There's a lot of capacity in those lakes, and had they been at that level when Hurricane Matthew came, we probably would have had no flooding. So we're looking at as a first step, just keeping that temporary pumping going while we do some additional work. Eastern Shore Drive, you may recall a couple of years ago, we had a presentation to City Council, and we talked about the cost of trying to protect the Eastern Shore Drive area from both sea level rise and drainage and stormwater. And
Sorry.
I just had a question about this, Peter.
Jim has a question for you.
Okay.
Phil.
Just on the Eastern Shore Drive, I want to make sure that it's clear that this is in no way the major $500 million plus project that you guys were talking about.
that's correct. And we'll
Okay.
talk a little bit more about that. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. But anyway, we were told at that, when we did that presentation, go forth and do a sea level rise study for the city, a comprehensive study, which is well underway. But we were also told, proceed on with design and acquisition for phases 1 and 2, which we'll look at in just a minute. And we can talk about where we are there. In the meantime, on this one, we have been putting in 5 backflow valves, which have been in place for over a year now. We have 3 tide gates that are under construction and will be completed by June. So we've been doing quite a bit of work there. Over in Asheville Park, this is another one where we found that the cost, we think, can come down a little bit. And in Asheville Park, we are doing some temporary pumping there. We are getting ready to construct a weir. The weir of sorts that was built with the subdivision was basically a pile of rocks. We have taken out the rocks. We are putting in a different system, which will work much better, but we have a lot more work to do there. Central Resort, we really don't have money set up for the next 15 years. We have a little bit of money there now, which is just enough to install a little bit of pipe on 22nd Street, and that's the extent of what we have in the next 15 years for that project. Just to lay one piece of groundwork for some of the complexity of what it takes to get these projects completed. In Asheville Park and Sherwood Lakes, where we already had subdivision plans where we could deconstruct those subdivision plans, look at what was designed, look what needed to be designed, and figure out what some possible solutions are. That made our efforts a lot easier to do the modeling and analysis work, but it still took about 7 or 8 months to complete it and get us to where we are today. So this stuff is not easy, it is complex, and it does take time. So this is, I'm not going to go through all of this, but what this is a process chart that was set up and published by the American Public Works Association. And it just talks about some of the complexities involved with project management, starting with the concept all the way through completion of construction. breaking that down just a little bit for simplification purposes. First phase we normally look at is preliminary engineering, analysis, and reporting. And again, we talked earlier about Asheville and Sherwood Lakes. 9 to 18 months is traditionally what our average times are. And this is based on years of project management, years of different types of projects that we have managed over the years, and how we have tracked what it takes to get the work done. So during this preliminary analysis, this is where we're doing modeling, we're quantifying problems, identifying what the problem areas are, we're identifying any improvements that can be done quickly. That's going to be important as we look at these major projects, because a lot of them, most of them, can be done in phases. We will be able to break some pieces out that we can do quickly. Other pieces are going to take a little bit longer. Some are going to take a lot longer. But during this phase, we look at alternatives and costs and again, develop phasing plans. Our design normally 15 months to 30 months, depending on the size and complexity of the projects we're working, and that's where we're actually developing the plans. The environmental and permitting phases can take anywhere from just under a year to 3 years plus. And I will tell you that even though we have all the money we need for the first 3 projects we talked about, Windsor Woods, Princess Anne Plaza, and the Lakes, those are also going to be the most complicated to permit. And we know that. So it's going to be a little bit longer in that phase. Acquisition, we're probably going to have some acquisition on all of these projects. We're not sure how much yet until we start getting into design. That process can take anywhere from about 9 months to 2 years. Utility adjustments, anywhere from 6 months to a year. And construction, again, depending on the complexity and the size, anywhere from a year to 3 years. This is not all consecutive. A lot of this can be done concurrently and will be done concurrently where it can. So looking at the individual projects, Windsor Woods drainage, and if you look at the map on the right-hand side, Windsor Woods to the left, Princess Anne Plaza to the right, and although it's not labeled, if you look all the way down in that lower right-hand corner in the red is the lakes. And all 3 of these projects really need to be looked at together as far as our modeling. And the reason is they all influence each other. They're all interrelated. The systems run together. At Windsor Woods, we have an influence from Thalia Creek, Princess Anne Plaza from London Bridge Creek, and from the lakes all the way out to Canal Number 2. And we have all these things go into the Lynn Haven River. We know that at least Windsor Woods and Princess Anne Plaza are in somewhat of a bowl, and we have to figure out what is the best way to get the water out of those. We've got a lot of points of entry from sea level rise. We've got a lot of points that need to be protected against sea level rise and against high tides. And then we need to have a lot of pump stations. And you've heard Mr. Hansen say many times before the concept of berm, pond, and pump, and that's what we're going to be doing in all these areas. So with Windsor Woods, our total project cost is about $35 million, and we expect that we'll be able to get to construction start in 2020. So we have a little ways to go. We will be continuing with maintenance, and if we can pull out some smaller type projects, we will be doing those as quickly as we can do those. Princess Anne Plaza, very similar. That's a little bigger project, $66 million estimate. And we're thinking that probably getting started with construction in July of 2022. So we're a little ways out on that. There's a lot of permitting involved in this one, and we know that. Both of these areas are going to have some number of pump stations, and we're not far enough along to even know what that number is yet. When you look at the lakes, the area that's outlined in red is really bigger than the subdivision, and the reason is the subdivision is all the way down kind of in the lower right-hand side, but it has water coming into it from all the way up through Green Run and Chimney Hill. So we need to look at all of that together, and there's a lot of water influence with that. So total project costs there are about $28 million. Only a couple of $1 million is up in the first 6 years of the CIP. The rest of it will be out in years 11 through 15. And some of that is the work in the lakes really needs to follow what gets done in Windsor Woods and Princess Anne Plaza. But, you know, and that's just because that's the way the water goes. It flows that way. So we have to finish that first. Sherwood Lakes drainage improvements. We started with about a $20 million estimate. We think it will be less than that, and we think we can get this project, at least the first phase, done very quickly. And that first phase, I told you we were doing some pumping out there now, and that's just with a pump that we have to go out and manually operate, load up with fuel once or twice a day when we need to use it. So we need to harden that. We need to make it a more permanent type pump fixture. And that's what the first phase will do. And quite frankly, if we get the lake to a permanent level between 3 and 4 feet of elevation, that will take care of most of the drainage issues that they have in Sherwood. We will need, as part of the second part of the project, to do some downstream improvements, and there's some additional permitting requirements that we'll have, so we'll get to that as we can. Eastern Shore Drive, the total project cost that we have for what we have identified here is about $83 million, and phases 1 and 2 are what we have identified in this program. And within this, you know, like I said, we already have a lot of tied gates and valves that are in there. We will have 3 pump stations going in phases 1 and 2, and we'll have some system improvements within the neighborhoods. They're all lacking a little bit, and by the way, those system improvements in the neighborhoods really go back for all of these projects with the exception of Sherwood Lakes. So, yeah, we'll be continuing to work on sections 1 and 2. We think we can start construction on some of it in July of 2018, and we will take as long as it needs to take, but it's probably about 8 or 9 years of construction. In the Asheville Park subdivision, we started with a total project cost of about $35 million. We believe that it will be a little bit less than that. The first project that we are recommending that would be done would be just what would be needed to build the next phase of Asheville Park, which is what's called the Section C, or Phase C. And the cost on that is somewhere around $8.5 million. If we can get that project done, then that will satisfy all of the drainage requirements of C, Section C, and it will do some nice improvements in Sections A and B. It will not totally do all of the improvements needed in A and B, but it will take care of most of the heaviest flooding, and will shorten the duration of flooding when it does occur. In the Central Resort, again, as I said earlier, we really don't have any money in the 15-year program for that. We have a very small amount just to do a little bit of pipe work that had been planned on 22nd Street anyway. When we do this work, it's going to require tide gates, pump stations, drainage system improvements, ocean outfalls, either new or connecting to existing or both. It will be done in multiple phases, and we just have, we don't have the capacity to do that with this program. There's another project that, although it wasn't on that major list, the Aragona drainage improvements, there's about $1.4 million that we had identified in our earlier presentations to City Council, and that's additional money that we need just to finish work in Aragona. We have done already a little over $2.5 million of improvements, going in, cleaning pipes, upgrading pipes, repairing pipes, getting the system as best we could back to its original design. And as we did that, we determined that there was a need for some additional runs of pipe, and that's what this $1.4 million will do. And that should be a very quick construction. Our stormwater master planning, analysis, and inventory, which has been underway for a while. This is where we are looking at each of the 31 watersheds in the city to try to do some of that initial modeling and analysis. We have completed work in 3 of the watersheds, Western Branch, Eastern Branch, and Great Neck Creek. We have 6 that are underway right now in Thalia Creek, London Bridge Creek, Wolf Snare Creek, Canal Number 1, Upper West Neck Creek, and the seashore area. And those should be completed within about the next year. And the next ones after that will be Little Creek and Elizabeth River. When we finish the 6 that are underway now, all of the watersheds that drain into the Lynn Haven will be complete. And they should all be complete by the end of this calendar year. During our budget presentation, we were asked to look at a couple of options of how we could do something other than a 15-year program, in particular a 10-year program. So we've looked at that a couple of different ways. Option number 1 would be if we use the same $300 million program and do it over a 10-year period. And then the second option would be if we looked at the bigger program, the $464 million program, and did that over 10 years. And the funding options that we worked with management services and the city manager to develop are shown on this sheet. And let me drop down to the note at the bottom of the sheet, and we'll work our way up. Our current equivalent residential rate is 43.3 cents per day per residential unit. So each resident Each residential unit pays an annual fee today of $158.05. Each additional 1 penny on the ERU rate is equivalent to $906,000. In the first column that you see, which is the city manager's recommended budget, the 15-year plan would require the 0.8 cents of real estate tax, which would be diverted from the light rail, and then an increase of 2.5 cents per year for 5 years on the ERU fee. And each of those 2.5 cents results in an annual increase to the residents of $9.12. So that by the end of 5 years, the total annual rate they would pay would be $203.67. Moving over to the next column, compressing everything from 15 years to 10 years, the 0.8 cents remains. The ERU fee increase goes from 2.5 cents per year to 3 cents per year. And then if you take the entire $464 million program and put that into 10 years, still keeping the 0.8 cents, the ERU fee goes to 5 cents per year of increase. Now, let me just say that that last column, I can make the numbers work on this sheet of paper, but I can't build that program in 10 years. So, you know, that's kind of beyond what we can get done. We think we can get most of the preliminary work done as far as the analysis and some of the pre-engineering and some of the engineering. We might even be able to get some of the construction money committed, but we would not finish construction within that 10-year period. And
Can you do
and
the
I will
300 in 10
and I will
years?
say that for the 10-year,
Somebody else can.
for the 10-year, I think we can get the 10-year pretty much done. We may have some construction that's still lagging beyond 10 years, but we can certainly get the construction money committed in that period of time. Oops. So a couple of things that are emerging areas, and they're not emerging as much as they are rising to a higher level of attention, because some of them are areas that we have known about and just haven't been able to complete work on or get work done on. The first three up there, Lake Chubb, Bradford Lake, Hollis Road, and Church Point, are all kind of interrelated, and they all go through some of the same systems before they outfall. Mr. Wood and Mr. Jones were at a recent Civic League meeting that we attended, and it was a very enlightening and eventful meeting. And we made some promises, and we're going to stick to those promises. One, that we are going to do some maintenance work in the ditches and the canals and the lakes that lead out of these areas through the Navy property and out to Little Creek Reservoir, which is where the outfall area is for all of these areas. So we're going to begin that. We've been working with the Navy. We've got an agreement to go on to Navy property. We're paying for the work, but they're allowing us to do it on their property. And we'll begin that this summer around the July timeframe. That'll take us several months to get through, and we think that will help those areas. It's not the total answer. There's a lot of work that needs to be done within the neighborhoods. In the case of Church Point, there's a culvert that goes under Northampton Boulevard that we believe will need to be increased in size. So, you know, we have a lot of things that we need to do there, and we'll get to them as money allows us to. The sea level rise study is continuing, and the master planning is continuing. And I'm telling you that both of those are showing us other project needs that we will have as we go forward. And we don't have all of those identified. They're going to be anywhere from small projects and, install a 50 or 100 feet of pipe here or there, up to major projects that require berm, pond, and pump. So, there's a lot to do there. And we do think the 10-year program or the 15-year program that the manager has recommended are both very balanced programs. We think we can do the work. If the money's there, we will make the work happen. So with that, I would ask if there are questions, we will try to field those.
Ms. Wilson?
Okay, so just roughly looking at the money here, and the 10-year plan would need 3 cents on the stormwater fee instead of the 2.5 cents, correct?
I'm sorry.
I apologize.
Please say it
It's-
again.
That's what it says right here, so.
Yes.
I'm sure that answer is correct. So my question is, I guess we have spent so much time with the water bill, and having that go up anymore is just not, anyway, not such a great thing. What I'm roughly figuring out with the light rail money, instead of 0.8 cents, would it be like 1.3 cents to make it work? Is that about?
Well, let me address the use of funds for financing and creating debt that pays for major projects. As Patty described for you, you have two categories of debt. You have enterprise debt and you have general fund debt. You have tax-supported debt, which is general fund, and you have fee-supported debt, which is your enterprise funds. If you take real estate tax, or you take $5 registration fee, or you take ARP, or you take open space, and you move it over to enterprise, it can only be leveraged in your CIP as pay-go money. Cannot be leveraged as debt service money. If you move that money into that program, you are required by your bond resolution to, your master bond resolution, to utilize fee-supported revenues in order to pursue the debt service of your capitalization of your program.
So the 0.8 cents can only be used for pay-go
Correct.
that you're already programming?
That
That's
is,
not totally true. You can talk, I've talked to lawyers that we have to adopt some other resolutions, but there's a mechanism by which you can. But you're saying something that's not correct.
well, I do believe it is correct.
Let's just let him give an answer, and then you can answer the
The
question.
issue here
Patty is
whether you
out of the
wanna
building.
Revise your master bond resolution. That's the issue. You've got a bond resolution. It is available to be revised, and that revision process will either be done in the next issuance or the following issuance, depending on the size of the debt issuance. But pretty much whenever you go to market, if more than 50% of your bondholders outstanding sign on to whatever the bond resolution is at that time, then your bond resolution gets changed, and it is that way forward. And so this sort of idea of supplementing fee revenue with other general fund revenue, that would be something you would work through with the bondholders in that sort of process by issuance. Large enough issuance, you could do it a single time, and then it's done.
So under your current bond resolution, you would only be able to use your ERU fees.
ERU fees for your coverage ratios, that doesn't prohibit you from supplementing with non-fee revenue. It's really the coverage ratios that you currently have in your master bond resolution.
So, Dan, if these are all going to be new bonds issued, your resolutions would be new ones that you would work out anyway, is that?
That is correct. So say you go to market with $10 million, right, of new money, then that's not sufficient to get that $10 million to represent more than 50% of your outstanding bonds. But if you went to market with, say, $60 million, that $60 million group is going to be more than 50% of your outstanding. So that new group is sufficient unto itself to change your master bond resolution. because those people that buy into that 60 million represent more than 50% of your outstanding debt for your stormwater revenue bonds.
All right, let's start with John.
Well, but in that scenario, when Patty was here, she was very clear that we're only issuing those bonds as we actually do the work. So, and we could see that, the bigger expenses are in the latter years. So during those years before you did that bond issuance, wouldn't you still have to abide by your current bond agreement?
There's two issues, right? One is the service of your outstanding debt, and one is the new debt that you're actually taking to market and making promises for your new debt. And so, to the extent that you currently have a stormwater system that's been issued and you have debts outstanding, then that would be the piece that you have your coverage ratios limited by your fee revenue. But to the extent that you're taking these sort of new pieces to your stormwater program that have sort of a new philosophy in how to fund it, and you're going to market to get new bondholders, then that would be the situation in which they would, and actually your whole stormwater system after you issued that debt would be working under that new master bond resolution.
So that's adding to our debt limit, right?
Well, no, that would be that would go into enterprise fund. So what Dana's saying is you would have to change your current resolution. You would have to dedicate the real estate tax, whatever percentage you're doing there, or
However the council wants to do it.
or the $5, or the ARP, or the open space. It would be dedicated to the stormwater fund. And therefore, that money would be a fee structure that's associated, dedicated to the enterprise fund, and would be utilized to create the capitalization necessary to make your debt service.
That is correct, and you
Well, thank
would
you,
probably
Dana.
want to revise your current policy because it speaks of tax-supported debt and fee-supported debt as completely separate universes. And if that was the way the council went, you would have to sort
Well,
of.
but Dana, that makes no mention of what the credit rating agencies would think, would it?
Well, the credit agencies want to see tax-supported debt. And so
Correct.
they want to know basically what is the capacity of the municipality to service its outstanding obligations. And so if you have an enterprise system, then that system's a closed loop. If you have sort of tax-supported debt, then it really isn't a closed supported loop. It's really about what can the city,
Correct.
through its council, support, and what is the ability of the local economy to support it. It's basically the things that she showed you. Those sorts of large economy sort of questions are those that are tax-supported debt questions versus the sort of system capacity, which is an enterprise related issue that the rating agencies will focus in.
Thank you.
And so let me address the rating agency's work in the two areas. You have rating agency ratings of our enterprise funds themselves. Water and sewer has it, and stormwater has it. As you saw in that one graph, we did not get a Standard & Poor's rating on our stormwater up there, but if you move in this direction, you're probably going to have to leverage all three rating agencies. And that's a procedure, and I don't see that as being a significant issue. If you take and dedicate to the stormwater program, its rating is unto itself. It is based upon your program and your commitment of taxes, in this case, the movement of taxes to join the ERU fee in combination to decide how much you can bring to bear and what the current market rate will be. If you do, as Dana said, and as we've done with all our programs, you dedicate enough resources to it, you'll maintain your bond rating program because you've committed taxes long-term and you're bound by that bond resolution to pay it. If you don't pay it, I think it defaults back to the general fund and to the city council, correct? Ultimately?
Let's not consider not paying it. Right?
Well, I understand that, but
what pains it takes to pay it, I guess, is
right. But that is how the bond agencies, rating agencies look at our business. So if you do that,
But you're already suggesting 0.8 cents.
that was in our program. That is used as pay-go. That is not used to service debt in the program. Because it's not part of our bond resolution right now, that 0.8 cents of real estate that we applied to the stormwater, $300 million stormwater program in the manager's budget is pure pay-go.
So if it wasn't just pay-go, then you use it for bond money, you wouldn't, that money would extend
Then
further
you,
out.
yes, you could increase the capacity
Not
of your
need The
program.
addition of the stormwater fee, you can increase the capacity of the program.
Well,
Change the way you issue the new bonds.
that is true. If you did a different bond resolution and you dedicated that amount of real estate to it, you would increase the program from 300 to some number, and we haven't calculated that. If you're willing to change your bond resolution.
Shannon's been waiting patiently, let her.
I don't know how patient I've been, but anyways. Can you explain, Dave, we all know Jessica and John have their other budget out there that, that they've been presenting. And I've got my Princess Anne Plaza and Windsor Wood folks here today and been meeting with them. And being in the trenches the way that I was and have been and seeing what they've lived through, and I know we have this cloud of doubt over our heads as a city, especially those people that follow John. They definitely question every move that we make. And I took it upon myself to call some engineers that have nothing to do with the city. One of my friends works for the Army Corps of Engineers, and I said, here, this is what the city gave me. Is this accurate? Is this truly what it's going to take? Is it really going to take this long? Is this realistic? And can this be done in 3 and 6 years? Tell me, give me your professional opinion. You have nothing to do with the city. You have nothing to do with anybody else. Just tell me. And their words were, no, this can't be done in 3 and 6 years. It cannot be done. And one of them made this comment. I've got to read it. Jim and I talked about it a little earlier. He said, in closing, there's risk in waiting for the next flood, but there's also risk in expediting all at once and not getting the enduring products the city should have. And I think there's a lot to be said with that, or for that. But, I don't want snake oil salesmen coming in and telling Virginia and the folks in Windsor Wood and Princess Anne Plaza that they're going to get this fixed in 5 years when it's not going to happen. So can you give me as best you can, the comparison? Can you give us a comparison to what John and Jessica have put out and what you've put out and what is and isn't reasonable, and show us apples to apples if you have that or can talk about that and explain the funding. I talked to Patty, and she talked about John's budget having $16 million in pay-go and $400 million in bonds, and that's going to add $400 million to our debt limit. And then she said, no unquestionable terms, that is going to affect our bond rating, not only our normal bond rating, but our public works bond ratings. I can't have that. I don't want our city's quality affected. I don't want their lives affected anymore. But I'm not going to sit here and say, okay, let's do this in 15 years if we think we can get it done in 12. But I'd be darned if I'm going to say, we're going to promise this is going to be done in 6 years, and it's not going to be. So can you give us a realistic picture here?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
I can't. You want me to tackle this one, or you guys want to pile on and then I tackle it?
Just to follow on what Shannon is saying, that's kind of my concern, and I think Phil said it very plainly through all of it. All of this stuff takes time to get it right, and I think that's the thing we've got to make sure we're doing, that we're going to get it right. Otherwise, we're just throwing a lot of money away, and then and all we have to do is look at Asheville Park and see what happened. That's a new system that was done wrong. And now it's all got to be ripped out and redone. And it's got to be done right. And in order to do it right, it's got to go through all of these processes, the modeling, and as he kept saying, each place is different because the water drains differently, and you have to deal with the natural situations. And it's not an overnight thing. And that's what I've been so concerned about, is that we're leading people to think that we can do this overnight. And I certainly don't want to see us, number one, tax people and raise money that we can't even spend yet. I mean, that's not realistic. But as we go through this process, it might, as Phil kept saying, there will be other little components that are going to come forward that can be done as they go through this process. And I think that's the important thing, that we kind of have to know it's a one step at the time thing, and we can't just go in there like a building a structure, a house, and say, okay, we're gonna do this, this is what's, it's going to be a process. And I think that's the thing that maybe has been lost, and when we're out there telling people we can do it in this time or that time or the other time. But I just look at Asheville Park and say, boy, have we ever learned there that you just can't go out and build anything and it's going to work. You know, to have to undo things is going to be the worst thing we can do.
So much this has been about me, I'd like to have a moment to respond.
Beg pardon?
Since so much this has been about what I propose, I'd like to have a moment to respond. I
Not
think.
about you, it's about the proposal.
No, but it is about me.
This.
It is about this. And the first of all, I like to take things very methodical. Let's first remember who accepted Asheville Park and who accepted Sherwood Lakes. That's the city staff. We approved what they built. So let's just remember that we're asking the people to fix it who accepted something that didn't work. So let's just remember that to start
Well,
with.
it's not necessarily the people who are here today, though.
Well, it's the city, it's the culture, it's the process. It's still us. So we just have, you can't, niche that away. Secondly, you gotta go back and look at that the money that we're talking about is being spent for something other purpose other than for flood control. The money will not be here when that time comes because it's being spent for a $50 million City Hall building. It's being spent for a $26 million beach replenishment facility. It's being built for trees on Lynn Haven Parkway. That's on that page, slide 31 of that brief. You can go look at the brief. Those are the items on slide 31 of that presentation. That was the brief that was given. So the money is gone when the time comes. So now you say, well, wait a minute, if you're rolling all this stuff up in a bigger project, your procurement strategy would be much different. You would be going out and looking for big companies like Bechtel, things that build huge islands in the Middle East, people that do big projects in the Netherlands. You would not be thinking that you would be doing this with organic staff, because I agree, our organic staff can't do this in 6 years, probably can't do it in 10, and couldn't competently accept Sherwood Lakes and Asheville Park. So let's just make sure we understand if we're going to make sure we get something, we're really going to have a procurement strategy, which my letter talked about. We would need a different acquisition strategy to pursue these projects than we traditionally do today to get stuff done. And they are sequenced. Now, because you fully fund something in 3 years, that means you have the money on hand. Doesn't mean that we'll all get done in 3 years. In fact, I've said that. I said some of these projects.
No, you haven't said that.
You haven't heard me at the town hall when I was there. Were you there? Were you there?
I wasn't there.
Okay,
but
well,
I've
then
heard
you weren't
say
there.
otherwise.
Well, if you weren't there, you didn't hear what I said.
It was on Robert's Facebook page, we all heard it.
Well, I said it would take 3, 6 years and maybe more, but it would be fully funded in 3 years, and they are. True, it's $400 million of debt. It's $300 million in the first year. It's $100 million. But the debt capacity of the city is going to be used and programmed for some purpose to start with. We're going to spend $150 million of debt for light rail. We're only talking about 70-something million dollars of debt in the first year that we're appropriating. Only $73 million of revenue bonds to do those projects. You're not obligated, you got a vision, but you're not making all the commitment to that to start, to look for, but you are making a commitment to get those things substantially moving, because when you look at the CIP, what do they have? All those have acquisition, some of them $20 million worth of acquisition. So if you want to do these things in parallel, in those first years, what do? You start looking at that money to make those acquisitions of property, because that could be done in parallel with design. So when you look across these projects and stuff, just wait till I'm finished.
I'm waiting.
Please, thank you. The sequencing of these events. But I'm just telling you that we can do better than what we've done. And those projects that we say we are more important, I just don't know how you look at people, and I said this repeatedly, look at people and tell them that a beach replenishment facility is more important. And if you think, well, maybe the projects, then great, do a lot more maintenance. Do a lot more maintenance. But the point is, you're going to go out and raise a fee? Let me just talk about why I'm not in favor of fees. I didn't vote for it in 1993, and I was here. Think of what a fee is. You pay a garbage fee, right? But you consume garbage personally, and you put it out personally. We haven't got to the point to charge by weight, but you use water, you get charged for how much you use and how much you flush. All that is water use. You control the consumption. Does anyone control the consumption of rain? Does anyone control the consumption of water? Does anyone control the consumption of water quality? No, it's like public safety. So you really ought to ask yourself, and I've said this many times at this table, that we are not going to be able to, and nor should we be addressing a public safety requirement as a fee. We just need to own up to the fact that ultimately this is something that's bigger than what the fee structure should accommodate, the impact it has on churches, which I've heard to talk about here, and businesses, which we've heard about how much of that fee. It's not the most equitable way of raising revenue for something that's truly public safety and not. Our proposal pays for putting sand on the beach with cash versus borrowing money. Why? Who would want to spend borrowed money on sand? I'm sure the city manager probably was paying for his with PayGo as well, I would hope.
We were.
Because who would want to pay for sand with borrowed money?
Yeah.
But the proposal, maybe on its edge, needs work. I've said that in my letter, that there's trade space here, waiting to hear comments. I didn't say it was necessarily the best answer, but it's showing you that it is an answer that allows us to more aggressively deal with this without raising fees and without raising taxes. And since the money had never been appropriated for 2 budget years for open space, I don't know why those terms even come up, because we made that decision 2 consecutive budgets in a row that light rail was a higher priority. So the money's never been there for 2 years. So I don't know how you attribute money to something that hasn't been receiving it. But I think you can fundamentally ask, is the priority of those items higher priority than dealing with our current issue, even if it's just to spend more cash on maintenance, which obviously you even found more things, but it represents a notional plan. And if I had to be accused of being too ambitious, well, hey, that's a good thing to be accused of, I think, when someone's house is flooding. If there's something that makes it a better plan and gets us all that, I'm all for it. But what I said before, and we'll say in here, is it's about the priorities, message that we send. And we're telling people that, that these other things are more important than addressing drainage in our city. And I'm just saying, raising the fee isn't necessary, and it's not. And those projects are not a higher priority than addressing drainage. But I am open to another proposal. This is, and Jessica and I solicited advice, is what do you think makes more sense? But I think if we went out and asked at a larger aggregate and did RFP, said, hey, who's out there that does this stuff on a big scale? Maybe 6 years is too quick, but maybe 8's possible. And maybe 10 really is possible to get it all done. If you took it and did it organically and pulled, not organically, but pulled a larger thing to do it and do it all. But I don't think we've explored that. But I do agree that we don't have the organic capacity to do what you said. But our procurement strategy wasn't to do it organically, it was to look at a different procurement acquisition strategy.
All right. Let's
Oh,
see.
Before Ben jumps in, can I just ask one quick procedural
Okay.
question? You said page 31 of your brief?
No, 31,
we only
no,
got
no,
this.
David's brief, 31, slide, the Office of Management Budget,
So
there's,
is this the sum total of your brief?
that's correct.
All right.
All right, Ben.
And
Too ambitious is not the word I would use for your plan, John. We have the same conversation every budget cycle, and I have the greatest respect for you. You're a very bright mind. You have a lot of good ideas. I take heart of all your ideas. But I'm disappointed with this budget from the standpoint that I believe you're using it for purely politicizing a unfortunate event. We've got Virginia Wasserberg, the founder of Stop Flooding Now. And you're using her misfortune for your political gain, in my opinion. And, the fact is, this is the most fiscally irresponsible budget. Just the 3 pages or whatever we've gotten from you, the letter and the PowerPoint, I asked for more detail. You couldn't provide any more detail. This is the most fiscally irresponsible budget that I have seen, from the standpoint that this will almost certainly reduce our general obligation credit rating, which you have insinuated that you told the Warren Buffett story about if I had to, whatever it was, pay to keep my credit rating, I can't afford it. So you obviously don't think that it's important, but it's very
that's an
important.
inference, I didn't make that explicit statement.
Well, I don't know how to take it other than an
Let him finish,
insinuation that
John.
it's not important. Now, I made a note here. These projects are sequential projects, and the things that can be done parallel, and Phil, I'd like you to answer this. do we have your commitment that the things that we can be doing parallel, we're going to be doing?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, these are sequential projects that he just told us. They're interconnected projects that can't be done before the other step is done. So they can't be done in 3 to 5 years, and I think that we are all under the agreement that this is our priority, is to fix Virginia Wasserberg's problem so that she can have peace of mind living in her home along with all the other residents that were had the misfortune of being flooded during Hurricane Matthew. But the fact is that Hurricane Matthew comes along again, even with these fixes, and I think that you would agree
I
with
did
this.
acknowledge
This
that.
is not going to prevent another Hurricane Matthew.
That's
You're
right.
still going to have flooding in those areas. And so, you know, you made the point about, you know, how can, you know, we can start buying land for acquisition before the design is complete. That's incorrect, because we wouldn't know what land we would need to buy before the design is completed. And so, you know, my biggest concern is the fact that we're giving false hope to people that we can do these jobs in a quicker fashion than we can do them. And, you know, perhaps going out and procuring private companies to do this would speed up that process. But that's not taken into account in your budget.
Oh, I think it is.
Where?
It's in the cost estimates themselves. When you get the, when you get to the economy of scale and you move these things up and step up the stuff, and you look at the.
But how can you step up? How can you step up? For instance, the Lakes Project. The Lakes Project is the outfall, and Bill, please correct me if I'm wrong. The Lakes Project is the outfall for Princess Anne Plaza and Windsor Woods. So how can we do the Lakes Project?
Not necessarily the outfall, but all three of those projects are related. They have water that goes back and forth.
And so it would be,
It's all commingled.
you wouldn't be able to do, let's say, the Lakes
They,
Project
the
prior to.
the Lakes project needs to follow the other two projects.
Correct. And so just giving the general public the perception that these projects can be done any quicker, I think everybody around this table wants to do. Shannon has been out there beating this drum incessantly since Hurricane Matthew, and I think that we would all do anything that we can do, but giving false hope to our citizens is the wrong thing to do in this situation. And I think that we need to be respectful of our citizens. We need to tell them the truth. And we need to stop spreading false information, and I'll leave with that.
All right, now,
Dave, do his.
everybody else has had their say. I want to hear Dave's answer to Shannon's question.
Thank you, Louis.
Okay. First, it's management of the city, it's the staff of the city, it's because we're all citizens here, we all live in the neighborhoods, we all felt the pain, we're all there. I think everybody, I don't think we're in hand-to-hand combat here. I think we're trying to find a solution to public enemy number one, which is stormwater. It's real, it's here. I'm sorry that the Antarctica is melting, and I'm sorry that Greenland's melting, but it's real. Climate change is here, whether you want to believe it or not. We are having more intense storms. We are having sea level rise. We are having more intensive rainfall. This incident occurred because we had 14 inches of rain in the inner parts of our city. We had a high tide, and the pipe system could not support the outflows of the volume of rain that came into the city. It was a weather event that is on the proportion of catastrophic. It exceeded a 500-year storm, and it was slightly below a 1,000-year storm. And not since Ash Wednesday of '63 has the city seen devastation of this nature. And we are now trying to figure out what should we do to resolve this. And the first statement that the city manager has to make is no amount of engineering, no amount of money, no amount of capacity, no amount of energy, effort or otherwise would have prevented the flooding that occurred in Hurricane Matthew. It was beyond any engineering project or financing that I can create or that I could solve. And so in the same vein that we went forward and built Rosemont Forest and did a great job, and for 7 years prevented flooding in Rosemont Forest that was getting flooded every other year prior to that, they were doing great. but the engineering investment that you made to create the pump station, to increase the pipes, the BMPs, and the collection system that pumped it all into Stumpy Lake was overcome, and they flooded again. And so everybody needs to understand, we are not promising to fix this kind of a storm no matter what we do. The conversation that's occurring here is the difference between the current bond resolutions and processes that we have through enterprise fund management and enterprise fund financing versus a proposal that John and Jessica put together that says, why don't we look at putting all our efforts into creating general obligation debt so that we can go borrow $400 million worth of capacity? It's a pretty simple effort. And if you will go to the middle of your blue screen, if you will exit out of this, and you will go to the center and you'll see, clear,
Go to the desktop.
X this out.
Okay, sorry.
Help me out, Michael. Stay with me, man. And click on this little chart right there,
You got it?
which you'll see is a comparison between what John and Jessica are proposing, the Moss Abbott proposal, and versus the city manager's proposal. And it really takes into accord our debt metrics. And you got to understand that we as management have a responsibility to make sure that we abide by our financial metrics with regards to long-term debt. And John's proposal, it stays within the metrics that we have. Right. But you need to understand it gives up all other projects. It gives up the roads, it gives up the buildings, it gives up the economic development incentives, except for the biomedical. I think you kept that in there because you understand the importance of having that corporate park. But it eats up all your PAYGO, and it does eat up your maintenance dollars in order to make $26 million in debt service capacity. If you go to the next chart, if you will, Michael, this is the most serious one of concern. And this is that 10% of your next year's expenditures metric that is critically important to preserving your AAA bond rated rating. What John and Jessica did was they did a math problem, and they proved that you can go find the capability. But they, in doing this, took all the light rail 4 sources of funding, which was 1.8 cents of real estate. It took the $5 registration fee, it took the ARP, and it took the open space. It also takes $9.4 million in higher lag and dedicates 7.9 or 7.4 or something like that back to stormwater, and gives the rest, about 1.5 million, to transit, which is a form of paying off this added debt that we have created to provide transit. What it does is it allows you to stay within your metrics, but as soon as you hit this metrics for one sole source called stormwater, you lose your flexibility to do anything else for your city. You will also jeopardize your AAA bond rating because you'll be reevaluated for having done that. And I think you acknowledge the risk we take in the bond market by giving up our ability to continue to build roads, to replace our facilities, to provide economic incentives, to incentivize growth of our city. And so I think it has inherently a go-to-the-bank risk that will be downgraded if you were to do this. So that's the right paradigm that John and Jessica's program provides. But they do show you that if you fully dedicate all your light rail to do it, you don't do anything else. You lose all your other programs and nothing else gets done and will be at risk. The city manager's program in orange stays within the bond resolution and applies the added increase of the stormwater ERU fee and adds 0.8 real estate as PAYGO, and also applies the residue at the end of this fiscal year of what the light rail creates, $2.4 million of capacity to the program. It also takes into account the slow, methodical process that it takes to do projects and raises capital so that there is a capital base that's created by dedicating that PAYGO, by giving you an ERU fee, and allowing the ability of the stormwater capitalization fund to grow. Phil Davenport gave you a good analysis. You can't do these projects straight into engineering. You've got to bring the science to bear, the modeling. And the reason why he had Asheville Park on your piece of paper up there with the X's from what you got Friday to here is because we put swags together of what this program's going to take in the face of what Hurricane Matthew did to us and the sense of urgency that are certain neighborhoods that were affected to do this. Some projects are going to be less. Asheville Park is less. We thought it was 35. We started modeling in June because we could not get the engineering company that did this work to put a model in place. So we dedicated $200,000 from our stormwater fund to do the modeling. They couldn't deliver that model until the end of March. And so it takes that long just to get a model and to do some cost estimating. It says, look, a more refined cost to finish Asheville Park in total is $23.5 million. But we believe a phase one at $9 million will relieve the massive street flooding and reduce that flooding to overnight in big storms and 2 or 3 hours in just everyday storms, which is a massive release to the neighbors that are living in Asheville Park. So it's a major cost savings because we gave it 9 months to be able to figure out what it was. The rush to put all this money on the table, it's well-intentioned by everybody here at the table. You have constituency that's screaming. But we don't know what the cost of Windsor Woods is, or Plaza at $66 million, or $28 million for the lakes. That's all in at 100 plus. We don't know that that's really the cost. And you're going to mess with Canal Number 2, which is a Corps of Engineer federal project. And you're going to have to build berms, not real berms, but you may have to raise a road to serve as a berm. And then you're going to have to put a pump station to collect the water and pump it over somewhere else. And it's going to take precision. It's going to take modeling. It's going to take a lot of permitting. And it's just not going to transpire at the rate you want. You've got 2.5 cents in the ERU. I'll address the ERU with and take an exception to that. Your current ratio of the stormwater fee is 62% is paid by residential and 38% is paid by commercial and nonprofit. That's how it's currently in your stormwater fund. That's how it's distributed. 62% residential, 38% commercial and nonprofit. If you take all your stormwater and you move it to the general fund, it now becomes 83% residential's paying the bill, only 17% is being paid by commercial, and 0% will be paid by your tax exempt. And so you need to understand that I understand the conversation, and you could call it regressive if you have a $150,000 to a $200,000 mortgage. But after that, it's not regressive, and it now is borne by the residential homeowner. And I would tell you, if you take a look at the demographics, how many really itemize at that level with that kind of a mortgage, I would tell you, it will not be beneficial to residential homeowners to come out of an enterprise fund and not to look favorably at an ERU tax system, fee system for stormwater that deals with helping you fix a coastal community problem. We are dealing with a coastal community problem, and we're all in for the survival of our city, and we are being watched. And Patty put a chart up there for Moody's, because Moody's is starting to look at all coastal communities, and we fared very well. Not to say the other cities in Hampton Roads are faring as well, but you've been in stormwater ERU business for over 10 years now, and you're committed to it. So you're talking about a crawl, walk, run program. We need a year or two of modeling. We're going to get going on those early projects. I can't tell you that 2.5 cents is the right answer, but I also can't tell you that $300 million is the total program or that $450 million is the total program. It would be foolish for me to bet my bars. None of my PEs, and I got 4 of them sitting on the row and a director that are telling you, I can't promise you that the estimate's there, I can't tell you that this resourcing will cover it all, and I guarantee I can't promise you that I can deliver it. The other question that John brings up, he would go get a Bechtel. I don't think you need a Bechtel. Let me give you a perfect example. Let's go into Shadow Lawn. Let's talk about Lake Holly, South Lake Holly, North Lake Holly. We know what it takes to go into a neighborhood, to dig up the pipes, to create the stormwater, to create the new water, to create the new source. Can you imagine when we dig open the ground in Windsor Woods and in Plaza? What do you think their pipes look like? What do you think their sanitary sewer looks like? What do you think their water looks like? When we dig it up, we're going to be fixing that too, and utilities are going to get in the ground, and we're going to do that. And it needs to be a measured approach, and it needs, for the dollar spend, you got to get a dollar output. And I don't want to commit to something that's so fast that the pipe size aren't right, the pump station isn't right, and sure enough, 125-year storm that we would hope would be covered by a 100-year design, maybe even to 250-year design, because the guys use P for plenty when they do this stuff, and all of a sudden it doesn't work. And so the sense of urgency here is you need to move forward with the program. We all agree to that. I'm encouraging you to stay pat with what your enterprise fund is. I love what Dana told you today. This is the new paradigm in the discussion here. If you're willing to commit some real estate dollars as part of the master bond resolution that expands the commitment of dedicated taxes to the Stormwater Enterprise Fund, then you can grow capacity. And you can still have capacity in your general fund to do the roads, to do the buildings. I know you don't want to do a city hall, but there will come a day that you're going to get that email from me, and we're not meeting here because we're shut down, the HVAC system's gone, I cannot get to it, I cannot fix it, the asbestos won't let us in there, it's in a vertical mode, and we're on card tables and roller chairs in Building 19 with a television connection van trying to get it up on the net for the public to view this, or we're going to go to the convention center for the next 4 years, and that's how we're going to operate. And that is not very productive in the eyes of our citizens or our businesses. And so you have to think proactively, just like you're doing right now. Let's get these projects done. But right now, I will go back over the next couple days with my team. We'll look at what real estate can generate for you. We'll take a look at, we still, the argument between whether or not a stormwater fee is the right way to go or not, I believe it really is. It's what makes you a financially secure city. It's how that system is being managed. We are actually paying for our stormwater system, and the folks that live in a coastal city understand that they gotta pay to live here, to work here, to have jobs here, to raise their families here. And I think they understand that. And we can add that real estate over there, and I will try to create a program that creates the capacity for that 10 to 12 year. My promise to you is I will have, if we increase the resources, I will have everything to contracting, if not in construction, and a whole bunch of it will be done in the interim in the 10-year window. I believe we can do that if we create the resourcing that allows you to do that. And I believe there's a ton of jobs here for all those local firms that want to do this work, because you're not going to be able to just go into Windsor Woods and tear up all the streets at the same time. It doesn't work that way. You start at the outfall and you come trenching down through, and somewhere in the middle you meet up, and that's how you do it. And when you dig up those sanitary sewer and those water lines, you get to replace those. So give me a couple more days. I'm looking at vertical nods here. I don't see nobody saying no. They wouldn't be willing to change the bond resolution to commit that point.
I'd say, wait,
Yeah, I
because
didn't say that.
unless we have a definitive response from bond counsel or the rating agencies that this will not impact our debt, our bond rating, and that would be a no-go for me, because,
I agree.
we can't do that. I appreciate what you're saying on this, and And the fact of the matter that it's a major project curb to curb, you know, I get where you talk about the Bechtels of the world, but honestly, you know, it's private sector people doing the work. I mean, you know, I haven't seen city crews replacing pipes ever. So-
No, we're not gonna do it. We're gonna do it with our local contractors, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, I completely understand that, but
Yes, sir.
please, from my perspective, I'm just me.
Right.
I'm one vote, but please don't engage in that until we know for sure that this is not going to impact our credit rating. That's just a,
All right,
that's a non-starter
Shannon,
for me.
then I got a couple things
If we
I
do
want to say.
go down this path that Jim's hesitant about, what's the process? What's the timeline? How does that work? What's that mean?
Well, we have a bond council that we can call and get some opinions, and Dana's been working it a little bit.
When we were looking at the light rail in the arena and increased school funding, we engaged the rating agencies on a provisional basis to give us kind of an opinion of what certain things would do if the city undertook certain actions. We could probably restart that project. That's actually through our financial advisor. But that would be the first step, is to sort of get their take on, if scenario A happens, what's the impact? Scenario B, what's the impact? We actually still have that from the last time. I don't know if finance can look at that, what the financial advisors say, to the extent that those assumptions are the same or similar as far as capacity, if the impact's the same. But that would be kind of the procedure.
Could this be done prior to the May 9th budget vote, or is there an advertising aspect to that, or what?
There isn't an advertising aspect. It's the engagement with the rating agencies, so you're really at their schedule, and
You can't do that.
3 weeks is pretty tight.
All right, did you get your answer to your question, Shannon?
Yeah.
All right, I got a couple things I want to say here. The first thing that concerns me here is I don't want us to put all our eggs in one basket here. The city manager has come forward with a plan to try to deal with flooding. He's cautioning us not to spend all of our money on one major issue. He's asking us to give him a chance to put his plan together and to act on it and see what he can do with it. That's what he's doing. And that makes sense to me. And because if we give the expectation that we can do it even before the 15 years, and we don't have the money together, and we have to give up everything else, roadways and everything else, in order to do it, I think it's a bad business decision on our part as a city. What we need to do is see how the plan works, and in a time frame of 2 years or 3 years, once we see how it's working, where we are, if we want to modify it, we can do that. But to put all of our eggs in one basket now would be a foolish thing to do, in my view. And I think the city manager has presented to us an option that is reasonable. It tries to address the issue, and I'm confident that he will address the issue of flooding. If there's anybody who runs a city in this country who knows what they're talking about in regards to this, it's Colonel Hanson, former commander of the Corps of Engineers of this district. And I think we've got a pro, and we better listen to him.
Just a quick question. Just because of advertising, we really couldn't vote May 9th on anything other than the 2.5, is that correct? So if we were to allow 2 years of modeling, then we could come back and revisit whatever we do. I think it's maybe what you're saying, maybe that's the right thing, but aren't we kind of, we've advertised a certain increase, and that's what we would have to re-advertise if we were to consider anything else?
We actually have done a different advertisement went out, and then we'll be out for the public hearing on the 9th, so there actually has been other public advertisements done.
The advertisement for the 9th is a stormwater bond issuance authorization advertisement. If you're speaking of an increase to the ERU, that would need to be advertised. That requires 2 advertisements. It has to be 1 week in between the 2. So you're probably looking at doing, if you would like to do that, a supplemental appropriation after May 9th.
But if we were to just stick with this for what it takes for the 2 years to do the modeling, then we can revisit it in 2 years. And then if we need, if it's clearer by that time, I think maybe.
But if it's the open space money going back to stormwater, we wouldn't have to do an advertisement or any additional changes to that, for instance? Is that
You're correct. Existing revenues,
Is a reallocation at your will. All I did was give you a recommendation of how to use it, and it's your decision.
Yes, John.
Thank you very much. Well, I have a lot of respect for the city manager at Lewis View, but here is my concern. Like I said, it is betting. I don't think you mischaracterized any of that aspect of putting what priorities were more important. But here's a scenario I would play out, and wouldn't be surprised if it didn't play out. These issues aren't going to go away. The costs are going to probably rise in many cases more than we expect, plus projects that we don't know about. We will have gone along and have spent money and have obligated debt for other projects, like City Hall is one of them, and some other ones which are more discretionary. So we will have moved and bumped up that capacity. We'll get down the road like we did before. When we didn't like our per capita debt ratio, we changed it because it didn't accommodate our spending desires, and I suspect that's what we'll do again. I think that's what that chart kind of showed, is people that had huge per capita debt, Denver, and had a AAA bond rating, so clearly per capita debt could be much higher than what we have and still have AAA, so there's not a correlation between the two. So that's clear. But that just means then is people would have had their taxes have gone up, but didn't get these projects, and we didn't set the money aside in a sinking fund or put in a reserve capital account waiting for the day when we needed it to draw cash, like we did with the pipeline for Lake Gaston when we paid for cash. We collected a lot of money over a lot of years and paid $200 million lump sum cash. I was here, Barbara was here, Lewis was here. So we could roll up all these revenues that we now don't want to issue debt for whatever those reasons are, as much as we're suggesting, and put it in a sinking fund to pay for cash or pay for debt at a future time when we know better. But we would have preserved the revenue flow and the cash flow rather than obligated it for other purposes. And now when the time comes, people have those tax increases on their property, and they also have now the increase, as you would suggest, the ERU fee. Now, looking at the ERU fee, there is a subsidy. You couldn't have said it better. There is a subsidy in the ERU fee. Commercial subsidizing and nonprofit subsidizing residences. Everyone knows me, I don't like subsidies no matter who they're for. So, but if you're trying to grow business, which we are trying to grow, then clearly you wouldn't want to be saddling them with costs that's a disadvantage, and we certainly don't want to put big pressure on churches who do a lot of things, and some of these churches have a pretty big utility bill. So that's not a lightly made comment, and I know you didn't make it lightly. But my only point is, there's a lot of sides to that dimension. But and there is a lot of our public, which we know because we just got told that we're on a per capita, our median family basis, poorer today than we were 10 years ago. And the projection that we got from Nina Tech is that those families are going to be, in real terms, poorer yet 10 years down the road, forecasted. So there's a large part of our population, that median, which is 50% of our households, for which the ERU fee is in fact regressive. I agree, only a third of our families itemized per the IRS, so your point's well taken. And for most people, their tax, even marginal rate, that's not a meaningful reason to pick ERU over
Real estate.
It's not.
Right.
It's really the characteristic, does the service being provided have some relationship to the person who's a consumer, and do they have any impact on its consumption, which they do not. And that's my only characteristic for tax over fee, is not the other economic considerations. It just doesn't have any of the characteristics of a fee. And how it comes to people and how they pay it and how it shows up is somewhat different. So that is a difference of opinion. So but if we're thinking that somehow that we can't be more aggressive than we are, and I appreciate the olive branch as well to look at what we could do with 0.8 or a penny to be more aggressive, because I said I was open to other alternatives. But I do believe that if you have big issues with public safety, bigger issues, that's where you take big risk. And sometimes you have, And of course, you'd have to look at those out years, because look, in the early years of the proposal, you aren't really getting that until 2 more budget cycles away, because we're in 17, 18, 18, 19, so we're really 3 years away. And still, in the first year of appropriation, there's not that huge difference between the manager's proposal and what we're proposing, which actually is being appropriated, actually being issued and done. Small difference, but when you look at where the money goes, it's a significant difference. So I think you have to look at in the year in which we're taking action, and I can't disagree with some of that. Your pictures are pretty demanding, and obviously we look at that. But the near term, what we're actually appropriating, all that dark cloud characterization doesn't apply. But so it really means is the out year part of my proposal is overreaching. Okay, that's all. But the near term certainly is not. Certainly is well within the band of execution. So I just throw that out as to put this in the proper context of what's being looked at here. But I do believe we can be more aggressive. We can be more aggressive on maintenance of our systems in other neighborhoods. And anyway, but I do appreciate the feedback that I've gotten. My intentions have never been, if you notice on the very front that says this is a 10-year thing, it's not protecting you against flood, and I've said every place I've been, that's been key. Get flood insurance, that's not a guarantee. And this is and I've also said at Plaza, that we can't continue to fund this maintenance program or flood without increasing taxes. And I told you, Mr. City Manager, before that, I think we'll have to raise them somewhere in the order of 6 cents over the next 10 years to get where we have to get to. And I think that's true. We will not be able to get that done.
All right, I'm gonna say one more thing, then I'm gonna adjourn this meeting, because I think we're all said enough, to tell you the truth. But I don't want this city to come to a standstill. And that's what doing the plan that John, you and Jessica brought forth would do. Unless the only solution out of that would be to raise taxes, continue to raise taxes to try to provide all of these other services, roadways, and everything else that we have to do. So if we commit to your plan versus the plan that the city manager has presented, we put ourselves into the position to where we are going to have others coming to us and demanding other facilities, other services, and so forth, and rightfully so. And we're going to be in a position to where we have to raise taxes in order to do that, and maybe have to raise taxes to the extent certainly that we don't want to do it. And I don't want to get ourselves in that bind. So that's my position, as Lewis Jones with his one vote here.
Or have another
And-
snowstorm that will
and,
have $1 million to
And
file.
with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting, because I think
Quickly.
everybody's had enough to say.
Hit the gavel quick.
My word. And we would have that.